Relaxing ourselves on the weekend at the lagoon. Everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to the international webinar by Kelas Kreatif Indonesia with the theme Critical Thinking in English Language Teaching. My name's Yuliani Kusuma Putri from STBA YAPARI-ABA Bandung, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. As you might have seen from the flyer, today we've got two outstanding speakers who will be giving their presentations about today's topic. But before that, there will be an introduction from the chair of Kelas Kreatif Indonesia, Mr. Dadan. Mr. Dadan is a teacher at Bandung Independent School where he teaches Bahasa Indonesia to non-Indonesian students. He has an extensive experience in teaching English in several secondary schools in Bandung, Indonesia. He is currently involved in several projects concerning teacher professional development, and he has published several book chapters on language pedagogy. His research includes ICT in English language learning. Mr. Dadan, time is yours to give introduction.
Hello, thank you very much Ibu Yuliani, Bapak Ibu. Thank you very much for registering to the event, and then I believe we already made communication since a couple days ago, maybe yesterday, and then explaining about Kelas Kreatif and what is the follow-up after the event. So basically, let me introduce myself. My name is Dadan, the representative of Kelas Kreatif Indonesia, and allow me to introduce again the information about this community. So Komunitas Pendidik Kelas Kreatif Indonesia, that's the name of our community. And actually this is in Bahasa Indonesia, but I'm going to, let's say, translate in English, yeah. So this Komunitas Pendidik Kelas Kreatif Indonesia is a personal learning community with the members, teachers, and then lecturers, and those who are interested with education. In 2008, established with the name Education Development Project at Bandung International School. And then in 2018, changed into Kelas Kreatif, and in 2020, becoming Komunitas Pendidik Kelas Kreatif Indonesia. So the vision of the community is actually to create the professional development, but in informal ways. So we communicate daily through WhatsApp only. We don't have any other platform where in WhatsApp we share information, and then we share about the professional learning opportunity, and then we discuss and learn and grow together. That's the ideal. The expectation at the end, all of the members, we are becoming the lifelong learner. And then, so here are the team of the management team of Kelas Kreatif Indonesia. We have Ibu Isri, we have Ibu Ati. I think many of them already coming to our event today, and we have Pak Asep, Pak Tris, Ibu Nisa, myself, and Pak Belvin, Ibu Pipit, Ibu Tintin, and Ibu Shirley. So basically the team will support all of us in terms of organizing the event and supporting all the educators in the community. And then the writing project, so far we have published, I'm sorry, I'm Sundanese, between F and P is like really difficult to differentiate. So we have published several books, and then almost all of the books will be already shared for free in the PDF form, and then we are not selling in the commercial purposes. So if you are interested to get some of the PDF files of the book, just contact the admin in the WhatsApp group, okay? And then today, one of the book also will be coming the door prize for the lucky participants, 2 lucky participants. And then public speaking. So every 2 weeks, Wednesday, every 2 weeks, we facilitate public speaking. And I believe public speaking not only applied or useful to those who like usually connect with the people, but also useful for the teachers, which every day we are speaking in front of the students or talking to our colleague or to the parents. So that's why this kind of public speaking activity, we make it as long term. Yeah, so every 2 weeks we will offer one different topic. And Ibu Yuliana today is actually one of the presenters of the public speaking webinars. We have many professional development opportunities for all of you. The idea is that just choose whatever you like, whatever you need for developing your skills in teaching. We have Canva, we have mind mapping, we have Jamboard, etc., etc. Lots of choices. Yeah. So every 2 weeks we also have that professional development. And the partnership. So we try to work together collaboratively with other institutions to get more knowledge, because I believe that many institutions can give contribution also to the members of Kelas Kreatif. So we collaborate with MGMP, we collaborate with Kelurahan 7, and then with TBI, with other literary organization, with IC, with PSSDM, with DigiPro, with DigiKids, and hopefully with other organization in the future events. We also provide activities for the children of the Kelas Kreatif. So the ongoing one, I cannot say almost finished. Yeah, the ongoing one is Kelas Menulis Junior. So we invite all the children in Kelas Kreatif community to spend their holiday by creating the story about their ideal, their future jobs. And then we have also drawing, English club, etc. And we have a webinar, English webinar every 2 weeks. And different with the other arrangement, because I said that every 2 weeks, but next week we are going to have another one. Yeah, because this is the special one. Today is the special one. So supposed to be the schedule is next week, but then since we have this one, so next week we will have the regular one with Ibu Ati and Pak Trisnendi and Pak Ahdi as well. Okay, so basically Bapak Ibu, this is the upcoming events that we are going to have from Kelas Kreatif Indonesia. On Wednesday next week we have public speaking, and then we have beasiswa luar negeri bersama OSCO if you are interested to join, and then we have the 4th Media Ajar Visual webinar, and then we have webinar, English webinar with Ibu Ati and Pak Tris with the theme, it's very interesting, unboxing descriptive paragraph with 5 senses. So it's gonna be very very useful for the teachers, I believe, yeah, talking about the topic on descriptive paragraph. And Bapak Ibu, please take note that all of the events from Kelas Kreatif are free of charge, except if you want to go to the intensive one, but most of the events are free. So just choose on whatever you let's say useful for your personal or professional development. So after the event, as I mentioned to you before, that we are going to have a book writing project. The theme is critical thinking in ELT. And then we have 3 educators who are going to select the articles. So Bapak Ibu, you have 1 week starting today until the Sunday next week to create one article around 750 words to 1,000 words in Bahasa Indonesia about critical thinking. And then we are going to compile all the articles and we are going to publish in a book. I believe it's going to be useful for the teachers, yeah. And the door prize, Ibu Yuliani. So this is the door prize that we are going to offer to the lucky participants. I think Ibu Maya later can raise question or something, yeah. I think Ibu Yuliani will organize that. We have 2 books. Merdeka Belajar Itu Asyik, written by the educators in Kelas Kreatif Indonesia, and it's going to be the door prize for today. I think that's it, Ibu Yuliani, the brief introduction about Kelas Kreatif Indonesia. Thank you, Bapak Ibu.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dadan, for the introduction. And for the participants, please stay tuned until the end of the webinar, yeah, if you want to get free books, yeah, free giveaway. Okay, we'll carry on to the main event, that is the presentation from 2 invited speakers, which will begin with Dr. Kate Wilson. Need I remind you that should you have questions, you may ask in the chat column during presentation, or if you want to be interactive, you can wait until Q&A session and you can talk directly to the speakers to ask questions, okay? Feel free to raise your hand and unmute during the Q&A session. Don't forget to mention your name and your institution. And again, stay tuned until the end of the webinar so you can get free books, okay? Who knows, maybe this is your lucky day. Now, let's move on to the first speaker. I'm going to read a brief CV of Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson is an adjunct associate professor at the University of Canberra, Australia. She is a lecturer and researcher in TESOL and was previously head of the School of Languages and International Education and director of the Academic Skills Program at the University of Canberra. Her research interests include critical thinking in ELT in accordance with today's topic, first-year transition to university, and academic literacy. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Wilson to give her 30-minute talk. Dr. Wilson, the virtual room is yours.
Ibu Maya, is Kate already here? I saw her before.
Yes, I saw her name, Jeremy Wilson, under Jeremy Wilson.
Oh yeah, Kate, you need to unmute yourself.
Or perhaps
she hasn't become the co-host.
Mute. She hasn't become a co-host.
Okay, I think. Okay, I will make her as a co-host. I see. Okay, Kate, all set.
That's it. I've got it. Well, thank you so much, Pak Dadan and Ibu Yuliani. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all and talking about critical thinking. Indonesia is very close to my heart, and particularly English language teachers, because I began my career as an English language teacher in Jakarta many years ago. I'm going to share my screen, so I hope that you can all see my screen in a minute, and then I'll be able to show you my presentation. Good. And can you all see my presentation now?
Yes, ready.
Great, that's fantastic. I can't see the chat box. Maybe I'll be able to do that later. Okay, so critical thinking in English language teaching. What an important topic. And I want to share right at the very beginning this photograph of this lovely teacher in Indonesia somewhere, maybe West Java, I'm not sure. Have a look at him and have a little think about him. I wonder if he is using critical thinking in his teaching. We'll come back to him later. Let's go on now and think about critical thinking. Well, critical thinking sometimes, I think, is rather a scary topic. But actually, children do critical thinking all the time. It's really child's play. And when children are playing, they are solving problems, collaborating together, thinking through things, creating things, comparing, contrasting, and all the time they're really active and engaged, and they're doing what they want to do. They're personally involved in what they're doing. And unfortunately, when we put children in classrooms, sometimes these things are lost. They become less active and less engaged. So how can we get our students in our English classes active and engaged, just like children? Well, I think in English language teaching, critical thinking applies in two ways. First of all, of course, we can use English to think about all sorts of topics: pollution, climate change, teenage delinquency, all sorts of topics. But we can also use critical thinking to think about English itself. So when you say to your students, can you think of another way to say you're welcome? Or what's the difference between the past simple and the past continuous? Or why do you really like this song? We're getting them to think about English. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to use Bloom's taxonomy as a structure for the presentation because I think you already know about Bloom's taxonomy. I think it's specified in the Indonesian curriculum, if I'm not wrong. So you already know about remembering, understanding, applying, analysing, evaluating, and creating. But how does that work in an English language classroom? Let's think about that. Well, at the most basic level, of course, we've got remembering, and this is what we would call lower order thinking. But it's important because it forms a platform, a basis for students to go on. And in your comments in the registration survey, so many people said vocabulary was a problem. So we use these classroom strategies like repeat after me and copying sentences from the whiteboard, but also vocabulary tests as tools that we can use to get our students involved. And vocabulary, it's so important. I tell my students 7 words a day, 7 days in a week, that's 49, 10 weeks in a term, that's nearly 500 words. So it's your role as teachers to push your students forward in learning vocabulary. But most of all, learning vocabulary in context. Okay, so remembering is fundamental. We can't avoid it. It's part of language teaching. And so is understanding. Now, I wonder if you know this creature, because one of the best ways of getting your students to understand is to get them describing things. Now, in your chat box, which I can't see for some reason, but I'm hoping I can see it later, in the chat box, can you put up some words that, or maybe some noun phrases, or just some nouns or adjectives that you could use to describe this strange creature? Have a go in the chat room.
Okay, participants, please describe the animal in the picture. A cute animal. Dr. Wilson, a cute animal, spiky, sharp.
Yeah,
Porcupine.
great. Are those some of the words?
Porcupine is not the description, but more like the name. Spiky animal, scary.
Scary. What about his nose?
Brown fella.
Long nose and tiny eyes.
Cute.
Claws.
Anteater, unique animal. Lots of people answered cute anyway.
Well, I'm glad you think he's cute because I see this animal quite often on my farm.
Oh, exotic.
So one of the other things that, yeah, it is. And one of the other things that we can do, very importantly, to help our students with understanding is translating, or what's called now translanguaging. I don't know if you know that term. The idea is that you use your students' first, second, maybe their third language to help them understand the new language. So don't be shy to use Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Sunda or Javanese or whatever the students' other languages are to help them get to understand. And we use tools like choosing and reporting and labeling diagrams and sorting and listing things, brainstorming. These are all sort of tools that we can use. Oh, by the way, it's called an echidna. So these are all things that we can do to help our students understand. So remembering and understanding their platforms. And they're essential, even though it's lower order thinking, they're essential to building a base so our students can go on and do the higher order thinking. So let's go on. I think you know that the next level is applying. What does it mean to apply things? Well, this child is not my grandson, but he looks very much like my grandson. And I gave my grandson this toy. Unfortunately, he's taken it away, so I can't demonstrate it, but he picked up the hammer immediately and went bang, bang, bang on the pegs. He knew exactly how to apply that tool. So when we start applying tools, toys, new apps, we are starting to engage some higher order thinking. And in English language teaching, of course, our students need to be able to apply the grammar rules and the vocabulary and the phrases and the formulaic language that we give them in order to really build up their English language resources. And I think that this is so exciting about language learning. When I arrived in Indonesia, it's a long time ago, I think it was 1974, I started to learn Bahasa Indonesia. Sayang sudah banyak lupa sekarang. But one of the first things that I learned was saya guru bahasa Inggris. And it was so exciting to go out into the street and meet people and say, selamat siang, saya orang Australia, saya guru bahasa Inggris. And by trying out and exploring the language, I had so much fun and I built my confidence. And your students can do the same thing. You can give them, for example, you give them a root, a stem for a sentence, like, I'd like a. And then they can go around and make lots of sentences. I'd like a mobile phone. I'd like a pen. I'd like a cup. I'd like a clock, etc., etc. And by applying their new vocabulary, applying their new grammar rules, they can explore and extend and feel that sense of personal connection with the language. Okay, now, in English language teaching, more specifically, we can use things like guided writing and dictogloss, which I love, and guided role play as all tools or formats that can help our students apply what they've learned. Okay, onwards and upwards. Next level, analyzing. Ooh, so what are we going to do here? Well, there's so many ways to analyze something. We're looking for cause and effect. Why does something happen? Reasoning. We're looking for compare and contrast. What's similar? What's different? So, for example, if you're teaching the future tense and you're teaching, I'm coming on Monday, I'll come on Monday, I'm going to come on Monday. Why are they different? What's similar? Why would you use one instead of the other? Get your students thinking about these questions. Don't just tell them, get them to do the thinking. Problem and solution. Of course, we can think back to that picture that I showed you about pollution before. But most excitingly, in terms of analyzing, I think becoming a text explorer or a text analyst is one of the best things that you can do with your students. Do you know what a haiku is? A haiku, it's a Japanese poem. Here is an example. My garden is full. The red flowers look pretty. Mum will get one now. So a haiku, I don't know if you know, it has 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then 5 syllables. So here's a little haiku which was created by a schoolgirl. In the chat box, would you like to say how this poem makes you feel? Put up some words for how it makes you feel. And maybe Ibu Yuliani will help me to read what's in the chat box.
Okay. Colorful, simple, happy, warm, proud, touching, love,
Lovely.
beautifulness.
Okay.
Really happy.
Oh, that's
there are lots of
lovely.
positive
That's
words.
so nice.
Yes.
Now, they're similar, aren't they? Warm, touching, lovely, etc. What are some of the words in the poem that make you feel that way? Put them in the chat box.
Okay. Pretty. The words from the poem is pretty that made the participants think about what they thought in the chat room. Mum,
Yeah,
okay.
that's right.
The word mum,
Yeah.
flowers.
Yeah, it makes you feel warm.
Yes. Because mothers
garden
give
is
us warmth,
full.
right?
Yeah,
I miss my
that's right.
mom. Oh my God.
Lovely. Okay, let's have a look at another haiku now. The next haiku is about the beach. The beach. My favorite beach in Indonesia is Pelabuhan Ratu in West Java. Now, in the chat box, put up some words that you know about the beach. What words do you connect with the beach?
Okay. Sand. Mythical. Oh, yes, because in West Java, Dr. Wilson, we've got mythical legends about the beach, yeah? The seas.
Okay.
Wave, hot, sunset, sandcastle, enchanting, wave. Okay, so there are some opinions, some positive opinions, and some mythical opinions, I think.
Good. Well, let's have a look at another haiku now about the beach. And I'm going to read this one too. Sand scatters the beach. Oh, I said it badly. Oh, I'll start again. Sand scatters the beach. Waves crash on the sandy shore. Blue water shimmers. Now, we've got some difficult vocabulary now, but I don't think it matters, because if you read it to your students well, they can hear what the words mean. Scatters, crash, shimmers. So you can build their vocabulary and help them to understand the poem. Then they could talk about why they like the poem, and then they could compare the two haiku and look at how many syllables there are, and they could work out for themselves that it's 5, 7, 5 syllables. Don't tell them. Get them to work it out. And eventually, maybe they can go on to write their own haiku. Here's one that my grandson wrote, not the 3-year-old grandson, the 7-year-old grandson. Here we go. Penguins bashing drums. Polar bears getting angry. Penguin runs to hide. So with some support and some scaffolding, I'm going to come back to that word later, your students can start to create their own haiku. Oops, I've jumped ahead. We're talking about analysis here. We'd better get on. Let's go on to the next level. Evaluating. Well, we've been talking about evaluating the language already, haven't we? What are the good things about this text? And one of the best things that you can do in your English language classes is peer and self-assessment, looking at language with a critical eye. critical in a positive sense, let's hope. What do I like about the text? Rather than a negative sense, though you could say, how could it be better? But Maya's going to talk about peer and self-assessment later, so I'll leave that to you, Maya. And then we can also evaluate things through the language. Topics like, should school children wear masks? Or should school students take mobile phones to school? And a great way to get your students thinking critically is to set up a debate. Now, we don't have time to watch this YouTube now, but I hope that you'll be able to come back later and have a look at that YouTube, or maybe Pat Dadan might put a link to it on Kelas Kreatif. It's a very short excerpt about a Thai teacher setting up a debate in a high school class in Thailand. I think you'd find it very useful. Okay, now creating, hooray, we've got there. We already have talked about writing a poem, or writing essays, stories. You can get your students drawing, singing, debating, making podcasts, videos, posters. And as they do this, they are hopefully engaging in critical thinking, partly because they are in control of their own language. They're making it their own. And I think that you can see that what we're talking about here is task-based learning, right? Task-based learning. And we're not talking about little tasks, we're talking about big tasks. Now, tasks are very, very important. I think it's the best way to learn a language is through tasks. But we want substantial tasks. But to make sure that your students are successful in task-based learning, they may need lower order tasks as well, like do the exercise, read pages 67 to 69, fill in the blanks, label a diagram, learn a poem. Those are all useful, what I would call little tasks that can build up to bigger tasks like writing a poem or making a video or whatever it is. And those little tasks, building up to the big tasks, those little tasks are what we call scaffolding. Scaffolding is so important. And in order for your students to be successful, they need to have knowledge, vocabulary, particularly, as you have mentioned to me, and you can get them to build up their vocabulary through brainstorming and mind mapping and labeling diagrams and so on. You can show them models, like I showed you the model of the haiku poem. Or you could get them to do little tasks like list the good things and the bad things. And so here's an example of task-based learning. It's called Create Your Own Utopia. So I don't know if you know the word utopia. Oh, utopia is the same word in Bahasa Indonesia, I think. Utopia? I'm not sure. A perfect country. So what you're doing is you're getting your students to work in pairs or groups to design their own perfect country. So they're going to need a lot of scaffolding. This is a big task and it's a rather amorphous task. So what the teacher in this YouTube that I've given you here, what she does is, first of all, she brainstorms some social problems. What are some of the problems that we're facing in our society today? And the students come up with crime, poverty, inequality, hunger, etc. And then you tell them, okay, now it's your chance to design a country with no problems, a utopia, a perfect country. So you give them a little map of the island, I mean, just an outline, and you give them a task sheet with some suggestions for the things that they need to think about in designing their perfect country, like what's the country called, what sort of population, what's the climate like, where do people live, and the students will come up with all sorts of great ideas, like, in my country, there are no adults, or in my country, there are no houses. Everybody sleeps in trees or something. And then at the end, they have to present their utopia for the whole class. And students can vote to choose which utopia they would like to live in. Now, in the chat box, could you put up what sort of critical thinking happens in this task?
Okay. What part of critical thinking do you think happens when you give the students tasks like this one? You can comment in
Remembering,
chat box.
understanding, analyzing, evaluating.
Yes, evaluating,
creating.
new insight, creating.
So it's very creative, but they also have to think analytically about what would happen if there were no adults? What would happen if there were no houses? What would happen if it never rained? And finally, they can discuss which of the utopias they think is best. And so then you've got evaluating as well. So these sort of tasks, the number of tasks, it's infinite, isn't it? Tasks really help students to think critically. Now, a very important part of scaffolding is asking questions. And I think Ibu Maya will talk more about this, so I'm not going to spend long on it. But I want to say, avoid telling as much as possible and ask questions instead. But when Ibu Maya and I did some research on classroom questions in Indonesia, we found that lots of questions were the sort of chorus question. What's the capital of Australia? Canberra, miss. And everybody choruses the same answer. So ask questions that you want to know the answer to, particularly questions about the students themselves. Questions that stimulate critical thinking. What would happen if? Could you? What's the difference between? Do you think this is possible? So let's come back to our lovely teacher and think about, is he engaging his students in critical thinking? Well, we don't really know. And I hope it's not one of you, because I don't really want to talk about one of you, but maybe you even know this person. But in the chat box, what do you think he's doing? Is he engaging his students in critical thinking? What do you think? Put up your comments in the chat box.
Dr. Wilson, you've got 5 more minutes.
Perfect.
Okay. Yes, lots of participants answered yes, he is actually engaging his students. Oh yes,
So
one of them also answered he is telling.
Ah, yes.
Maybe not, seems that the students are repeating. Maybe he asks his students to listen and repeat.
Yes, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think he's actually probably telling, and this is obviously a photograph which is posed, isn't it? And one of the little girls is answering his question. She's engaged, but actually she's the one on the front row. And I think if you look at the students on the back row, they're not really engaged. And another thing that makes me think, I'm not sure about this, is because This is a teacher-fronted classroom, isn't it? The students aren't working together. They're not working in pairs or in groups. And I think what he's doing is he's saying there are 3 ways. What do you think are the 3 ways? Instead of saying, well, I think there are 3 ways, but can you think of other ways? Can you think of different ways? What do you think? Rather than telling them his opinion. Well, I'm doing a lot of that myself. So let's just go on now. This is a very important slide. Great thinking routines. Now, it's important because when we're teaching critical thinking, we have to teach our students skills, but we also want them to develop habits or routines of critical thinking. So using things like think, puzzle, explore is a good way of giving them a technique of thinking critically. One of the best ones that I know is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. When my husband and I have to make a decision about our farm, we always write down, well, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats? Or you can use Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. And if you don't know about that, I strongly suggest that you Google them. And I also recommend this website from Project Zero. Now, this is a routine called See, Think, Wonder. So in the chat box, what can you see? Put up some words or noun phrases. What can you see?
Wildfire, bushfire, forest fire, danger, firefighter.
Good, good. And then we can ask our students, what does it make you think? So this time start off with, I think. Are we getting anything in the chat box?
Yes, someone's putting off the fire. I think it's hot as hell. Have you been to hell? I think it often happens in Australia. I think someone is trying to control the fire. From Adelia, I think there is someone burns the forest. You're too negative thinking, Adelia. Maybe it's an accident. And then I think there is Michael Jackson. Fauzia, okay. Yeah, because the firefighter just poses like Michael Jackson. I think it's very hot, okay. I think it is hazardous. A man is a hero, okay. I think that is a damage.
And then I think we can go on to ask the next question. So it's see, think, wonder. What do you wonder? I wonder if, or I wonder whether you can write another sentence with, or it could be I wonder why.
Okay. I wonder if people die, animals die. I wonder how it ends. I wonder if I could help him. Okay. I wonder if we can put a stop to this.
Yes. And I really like the way that we're getting, I wonder if I can help and if we can put a stop to it, because what I can see is that you're getting personally involved with this.
Yes.
So this is a very nice technique that you can use online. And so is this. You can engage your students in critical thinking when you're teaching online. Do you agree or disagree? Now, I don't know how to do this. Oh, yes, if you go to your menu bar, you can take a pen and annotate it and draw a line on it. Oops, no, whoops, sorry, back I go. Oh, no, sorry, I jumped. So I think you can take a pencil. I can't do that with this Zoom presentation, but if you're on another platform, you can often get your students to mark on where they stand. Do they agree or do they disagree? My students love that sort of activity. It gets them very involved. Or we could think about, now, I'm moving on now to thinking about teaching reading, because many of you asked about teaching reading. We looked at my friend the echidna before, And we could ask our students first to describe it, put up the nouns, the adjectives, etc., as you've already done, and then to list how many questions can you think of about this question? How many questions can you make about this echidna? And I don't think we've really got time to do that on the chat box now, but you can then, once your students have brainstormed those questions, then you can go on to give them the reading passage about the echidnas, and they already know lots of the vocabulary and they're looking for the answers. You could have them read and make a worksheet with their questions on one side and their answers from the text on the other side. So I think we're probably out of time. So just a few final tips. If you are curious and you are excited by learning and you're open to new ideas, and I think you are because otherwise you wouldn't be here in this webinar, if you show that to your students, they will pick up that habit from you, because students learn a lot more from how you are, the sort of person you are, than from what you tell them. So if you show that you're curious, for example, they ask a question and you say, I don't know the answer to that. Let's go and look it up. And if you ask them genuine questions that you want to know the answer for, they're called referential questions, not display questions. You'll get your students much more involved, getting them to do the thinking while you, unlike the teacher in the picture that I showed you, while you take a back seat. And finally, start with the easy things and build up. And I know that Ibu Maya is going to talk more about starting with the easy things. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much, Ibu Yuliani. And I'm looking forward to your questions later.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Wilson, for the enlightening talk. I mean, there are lots of participants who already felt they are being enlightened. Yeah, please give a big round of applause to Dr. Wilson, even though it's virtual and I can't hear the applause. And before we move on to the second speaker, I'd like to invite all participants to turn on your cameras for a photo session, okay? Please turn on your cameras for photo sessions, because if we wait until the end, you might be tired and you might not be as beautiful and handsome as right now, right? Okay, let's see. All right, so in my Zoom, there are 6 pages and I'm going to count to 3 for the first page, okay? Look at the camera and smile, okay? First page, 3, 2, 1, okay? Hang on. My computer is very traditional, so I need to print screen and then I paste, okay? Second page, look at the camera, 3, 2, 1, okay? Hang on. Keep smiling for the next 1 minute. Okay, third page, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next, fourth page. Okay. Okay, fourth page, apparently no one turned on the camera, yeah? But okay, it's okay. I'm going to screenshot it anyway. Okay. And then page 5, still no cameras. All right, and last page. No cameras, only profile pictures, it's okay. All right, that's it then. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Please stay tuned until the Q&A session, okay, Dr. Wilson. And then let's continue to yet another excellent speaker, Maya Defianty, Ph.D. Dr. Defianty is a lecturer at UIN Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta, where she has taught several courses in the area related to teaching English to speakers of other languages, or TESOL, and she has an extensive experience in working with English teachers all around Indonesia on how to enhance their teaching practice. Her research interest is on teachers' classroom assessment practice. She earned her Ph.D. from University of Canberra, Australia. Please welcome Dr. Defianty for her 30-minute presentation.
Thank you very much, Ibu Yuliani. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I'd like to thank Pak Dadan from Kelas, the founder of Kelas Kreatif, and also the committee, and also Ibu Yuliani for having me here. Let me extend my warmest regard to the audience who are very still have the energy on Saturday. On weekend, you still have the energy on Saturday evening. And I also would like to say hi to, I think I recognize some names, my old friends. I recognize some names. So hi, and let's have a great reunion. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know that, allow me to share my PowerPoint. Okay, wait. Okay. Okay, Bapak Ibu, as we all know that in the next month, which is 2 days from now, we are going to have what's so called as assessment competency minimum, or AKM. Now, if you in this AKM, this is one of AKM is a new version of national standardized test. Okay, this is what I want. Okay, now in the AKM, one of the distinctive features of AKM is that students will be assessed their higher order thinking skill. Some people consider this as the current feature of AKM. But however, let me withdraw your memory that actually the government has already done this, that they had once assessed students' HOTS through standardized national test atau UN or UN. If you remember, in 2018, the government administered UN, which integrate the element of HOTS. And the media also documented. There were a bit chaos at that time, as documented here. Okay, it is difficult, lots of complaint, and then it against the human right, and then bikin gaduh. It is chaotic at that time. It was chaotic at that time, and then the Mendikbud said, the minister said, at that time, he said that, well, in 2019 it will be more difficult, but apparently in 2019 it was decided that the government will stop administering and will be substituted by AN, Assessment National, and one of them is AKM. Now, there's a wave of protests with this UN in 2018, mostly because teachers feel that they are not ready. They haven't taught the students on that particular type of test. And not only the teachers, there were also a big protest, a hype protest from the students, as we can see from their tweet here. Okay. Now, higher order thinking skill, or HOTS, can be challenging, especially when our culture, which is condition students to to think in lower order thinking skill and also the culture. We usually have lived in this culture. How can we change this culture to this one? I think it also show you the picture. What is the teacher doing? From this culture to this culture, it cannot be shifted easily. Or from this culture, I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. From this culture that students need to be obedient to this culture in learning, it can be challenging. So this is also a hint that improving students' critical thinking can also be challenging. Now, AKM, one of the purpose of AKM, as it has been mentioned before, is to improve students' critical thinking. Now, let us see the connection between critical thinking and assessment. Yes, assessment has a potential role to improve critical thinking. If you think of it like when you teach and then you assess when we teach and then we assess the students and then we get the evidence of students learning. So if we assess the student based on their level of thinking, it means that we are going to get evidence of the level of their thinking, or let's say whether or not students are able to think critically. And then this evidence will then need to be followed up. If you are a teacher, perhaps, for example, when you see that your students have not yet understand the learning materials that you give, perhaps you will reteach. Or if you see they are already good at it, and then you take 2 steps forward, for example. So that's how critical thinking, assessment, and teaching connected with each other. That's why assessment is a potential means to improve students' critical thinking. Nonetheless, so in 2018, there was a big chaos, as I said. But then today, as we are going to encounter the test next month, everybody was getting ready for that. There was no protest, and teachers accept that and prepare the students. Unfortunately, they still prepare students to face AKM in the way that they taught the students when they face UN. So they rehearse the test so that student will be able to answer the test. But that is not the aim of having the test. The test is only to measure students' critical thinking level, the level of students' critical thinking. So you do not need to rehearse this test in order to make students be able to answer the test. So what should the teacher do actually? The only things, not the only things, one of the most important things that teachers need to do is to foster critical thinking to their students. However, if we see the condition, many still perceive differently. You can see there are lots of webinar merancang AKM. We do not design AKM. It is the government's job to design the AKM. Or this one, mempersiapkan AKM. No, we do not prepare them. We teach them critical thinking, yes. Or this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. And also the books. There are so many books published. This is a real pictures. I took it in one of the biggest bookstore. Sebut saja namanya Gramedia. So this is a true story. So there's so many books that say it needs that aim to. Sorry, I ran out of battery. That prepare students for AKM. Now, This is quite interesting, actually, especially when our minister said that this you do not need to prepare, you do not need to drill students with AKM tests, but you do need to teach them on how to think critically. This is what he said, and this is what he said. Now, what happens if we keep the same mindset that when you have the national test, you need to practice the test, and this will happen. So it will make no difference whichever the reformation, the assessment reformation that we have from high stake. UN is high stake because it determines students' learning continuity. To low stake, there will be no difference if we treat AKM the way we treated UN. So then the question is, how can we make use of assessment to improve students' critical thinking? So this is what we are going to talk about today. So first, we are going to talk about some general principles on assessment, and then higher order thinking skill. And then afterwards, we are going to focus the discussion on assessing higher order thinking skill, or HOTS. Okay. And the last part, we are going to talk about some points to ponder or some reflection after this presentation. Now let's move on to the first section. So here, now, there are some general or basic principles of assessment. First, when we assess students, we need to ask first what to assess. As a language teachers, we assess their language competence. We assess teaching, reading, speaking, writing. But then we can also, when we assess them with this language skill, this macro language skill, we can also have an insight of their higher order thinking skills. We are going to talk about that further later. And then next is what research instrument. So what to assess and using what research instrument. What's so-called as research instrument is that, not research instrument, sorry, assessment instrument. Assessment instrument. What's so-called as assessment instrument is that any learning activity from which you can get information about students' competence. That's what assessment instrument is. So for example, if you assign your students to write an essay, and then the essay is submitted, and then you consider that as a learning evidence, that you derive a conclusion, of course, it is a tentative conclusion about student competence, then that's called that piece of essay, the assignment that you assign to your students, that is assessment instrument. Okay. Have a look at this. So I skip this. So this one. So assessment instrument can be a test. This is taken from Brown in 2010. Assessment instrument can be in the form of test, portfolio, dialogue journal, observation, peer assessment, self-assessment, or even your question. That is considered as assessment instrument. So you have what to test. So of course, when you test about writing, it's not that I'm going to assess writing, but it should be more specific. I'm going to assess students' competence, for example, in writing narrative text. And then what are the instruments? Because you cannot depend solely on one assessment instrument. Okay, so assessment is not limited to test. Okay, and then the next one is criteria. What to assess, how to assess, what instrument you are going to use, and then what are the criteria. When you have them, when you have all of them on your mind, then you have fulfilled the criteria or the principles of conducting assessment. because after you fulfill them, then you can decide whether your students have successfully meet the learning goals or not. So you need to have the criteria, their performance and the criteria, whether there is a gap or not. So those are the basic principle of assessment. Now, how about the basic principle of higher order thinking skill? So this is basically what we are going to talk about. What we talk about higher order thinking skill, it has been discussed by Kate. Okay, and then this is the principles of assessing HOTS. First is use introductory materials. What does it mean? So when you assess their critical thinking, their HOTS, you need to equip them with the materials. Well, this is very sensible as we are teaching language, as we teach language. For example, when you teach reading, of course, there has to be the reading passage, right? But then when you teach speaking, so you don't ask them to memorize, but then, for example, if you assess HOTS, but then you ask them whether or not they can use the relevant expression for the particular context. So you can give them the expression that you have learned, or they have the access to those expressions. But then what you are looking for if you assess their HOTS is whether or not, because it involves thinking, whether or not they use the correct expression for particular context. And then next is use novel materials, use new materials. So you do not test the same materials. For example, in your class, in reading class, for example, you teach them about Oliver Twist. And then the assessment that you make is what is blah, 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 blah in Oliver Twist. But then it is the same materials. So use novel materials, use something new. If you teach them, for example, the structure of narrative text in Oliver Twist, it means use another novel materials. You ask them this narrative structure in different work, in Pride or Prejudice, for example. And the next is manage cognitive complexity and difficulty separately. Complexity and difficulty. Let me give you an explanation here. Now, I have 3 questions here. Ibu Yuliani, can you help me here? Is Ibu Yuliani here? Okay, now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
Now, please, I have 3 questions here. Please determine whether the first to the third question, let's do it one by one, yeah. Is the first question difficult or easy? If it is easy, can you raise your thumb? You can use your reaction. If it is easy. The first question, who
Okay.
is the main character
Give
in
your
Bumi Manusia?
reaction. Okay.
Is it
Okay.
easy or difficult?
14 thumbs up, 15 thumbs up. Okay. And keep
Okay.
coming. 20 thumbs up, 21 thumbs up.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Do students need to think critically? Does it require critical thinking skill, or does it require HOTS to answer this? The first question.
Yes or no? The first question, who is the main character? No. The participants, majority of the participants think the students do not need to think critically.
Okay, so the first question is, it is easy, right? And it does not involve HOTS. Okay. How about the second question? Is it easy or difficult?
Second question. Difficult. Okay, starting to get difficult, is it?
Okay, it is difficult. Do students need to use their HOTS in answer this, or lots is actually enough?
Yes. Most of them answered students need to use HOTS.
Okay. The third question, is it easy or difficult question?
Name all characters in Siti Nurbaya. Easy. All of them answer easy. You can simply Google it, yeah?
Okay. Does it involve HOTS to answer this question?
No.
No. Okay, very good.
Mhm.
So the first question is, this is an easy question. So this is recall. You can just recall. Even when you only scan the novel, this is from Pramudia, yeah? You can easily answer the question. How about number 2? Well, number 2 is actually easy. Actually, this is an easy question because they feel sorry for Snow White, for example. But then it involves HOTS, because when you answer this question, you need to analyze the book again or the story again, and then you come up with the story and you come up with the answer. Okay, so in terms of, this is not complex and this is not difficult, the first question. The second question, this is complex, but it is easy. And the third question, it is not complex, it does not require HOTS, but it is difficult. It's a book. You need to name all the characters. There are a lot of characters. So that's difficult. Because if you are to name all characters in the book, it means that you have to read it and then write them down. That's difficult. So that's what I mean with complexity and difficulty. Now, I remember that when Kate and I was in Medan, do you remember, Kate? One of the participants asked that, is hot question means difficult question? He asked that. So it is not always like that, because complexity and difficulty are two different things. Okay, next. I have another question for you. Now, there are two passages here. This is students' work. There are two students who write an essay. In your opinion, which essay is better and why? Okay. I give you 2 hours to answer the question. Okay. Which is better and why? You may use the chat box.
Yep. Still reading, maybe, Dr. Defianty.
Okay.
Still reading the
Okay.
two passages.
Itu dulu. Which one is better? 1 or 2? I said the question is better.
Okay. Some answers the first
Okay,
one is
time's
better.
up. You have to submit your work now. Come on, or else I will not accept your work. Okay.
Okay, so all of them answer the first one is better. The
The
first
first
student.
one is better. Okay, the first one is better. Next question. Why? I said
Why
why.
the first one is better? Okay, from Dewi Arya, because the student did analyzing by comparing those instruments.
And then others respond.
Okay, the complexity of the vocabulary. Okay, authenticity.
Authenticity. Okay. So
And
which
the
one is
first
not
one,
authentic?
yes, the first one, according to Yuka, gives clear description, coherence and unity, according to Rina.
Okay.
And then from Ms. Wantri, both have got different types of text. The first one is full of comparison, while the second one is more about description.
Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of language learning, it is easy that we said the first one is better. You mentioned earlier it's about cohesion, cohesive organization, and so on and so forth. But then in terms of their HOTS, their higher order thinking skill, they are quite similar. So their ability to analyze and make comparison between two things are actually quite similar. It's not that big difference. But then in terms of language competence, number one is much better. Now, sometimes as we are language teacher, it is quite complicated to determine whether they are not able to answer because of their competence or they actually lack of critical thinking. But what I'm trying to say here is that those are almost two different things. Okay, next. Okay, now we are talking about assessing HOTS. Now, assessing HOTS, let's begin with analyzing. There are several assessment instruments, the instrument that you use to assess students' higher order thinking skill. Now, the first one is questioning. This is a very common instrument that we use, but we seldom capitalize on that questioning. Now, can you read the question and answer the question? Billy's mother has 5 children. The first one, Lala. The second one, Lele. The third, Lily. The fourth, Lolo. And what was the fifth child name? Could you please write them down on the chat box?
Billy, Lulu.
Lulu, Billy.
Lulu. Okay, Billy's mother
Lulu.
had 5 children.
Ibu Yuli, what is your answer, Ibu Yuliani?
Billy's, is it a riddle? Because I saw riddle once on Facebook, and if I answer it incorrectly, then I would have to be punished.
Oh, yeah.
Billy's mother had 5 children. The first was named Lala, the second was Lele, the third was named Lily, the fourth was named Lolo. What was the fifth child named? Definitely Billy, according to Irfan, because it's Billy's mother.
Very good. Definitely, it's Billy.
Yes.
Because it's Billy's mother. But then you might get tricked with the name Lala, Lily, Lolo. Who else? Lele, right?
Mhm.
But then this is analytical thinking. So if your student can analyze this and get the correct answer, it's Billy's mother. So the fifth child should name Billy because it's Billy's mother. And another evidence is there are already 4 names mentioned, right? There are already 4 names mentioned.
Yes.
So the last one, it has to be Billy. So you can assess your students' HOTS by questioning. You can you can take it from the textbook like this, from a passage, for example. I'm not going to ask you to read this passage, but then the question can be like this: what is the main point of the passage above? State the main point on your own words, then give evidence. So the evidence that is important. As a language teacher, perhaps we seek for the correct answer. But then if we want to assess their HOTS, what we are looking for is the reasons. So we know that they analyze the text, the evidence, from which evidence that they arrive at that answer. So it's almost intertwined with each other. Okay, so that's why ELT is is very accommodative to insert critical thinking elements. Okay, and so first we know the aim. So if your aim is to assess students' analysis skill, for example, so first that you have what is S, and second you have the instrument. You can use questioning, you can use a reading passage, and the next one is you need to have criteria. And don't forget to document. You need to have the criteria. So these criteria can be customized to the assessment instrument that you use. This is just an example. So I keep this open-ended. Clear, appropriate statement of the main point. And then the answer, appropriateness of evidence. So the answer, the evidence, and soundness of reason. Yes, they give reason, but is it a sound reason? It means, does the reason make sense? Does the reason that your student give is make sense or not? So that's sound reasoning and clarity of explanation. So these are the criteria of how you can assess your students. You may put a tick, a tick, a tick. 2 ticks means what? 1 tick means what? Or you can use for the same task, you can use this. This is also the assessment criteria. This is version 2, I call that. Or you want to be more meticulous. If you need to score 2, 1, and then you assess them. If you want to be very meticulous, very detailed, you can use this. You may prefer that. But you need to have, we need to have assessment criteria. We need to have the criteria that we can determine a student's level of HOTS. Okay, next is assessing, evaluating.
Dr. Defianty, the time is 1 more minute.
Can I have another 5?
Yeah, okay, but maybe the Q&A session will be reduced. Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, I will run. Okay, so the next thing is evaluating. Now, one of the assessment instrument that you can use to evaluate your students is writing book review. That is assessment instrument, because from the book review, you can get evidence of their learning. So evaluating comes with this. Of course not, is it fiction or non-fiction? That does not assess your students' thoughts. But then this question, how many stars do you give this book? This is evaluating. What is your reasoning? So you ask your students to evaluate the book. Of course, again, we need to have a set of criteria to determine whether their thoughts. Another one is peer assessment. So peer assessment, simply put, is to assess peer assessing their peers' work. Haha, there's so many peers' work. Now, what is important here? So in peer assessment, you cannot just say, okay, now this is your friend's work, please check. No. But then for peer assessment, again, this is assessment. You need to have criteria. So students know what they need to do. And then you can pick their thoughts on the comment that they give. Is it a yes or no? What is the comment here? Because blah blah blah. So they evaluate. This is the evaluation. This is an insight where you can see their thoughts. Okay, this is the criteria. This is the criteria, and this is one is creating. So creating one of the activities in creating to assess this level of skill is to write an alternate ending of a story. For example, you ask them to write an alternative ending for Snow White, for example. And then another activity is you can ask them to write a storyboard. That is creating, to create something new. And then you can assess them. What is the most important here is that it's not about is this criteria. Saya jadi nggak fokus, Bu Yuli. This criteria. First is accurately connected integrated information from original sources to support creation. Does it really connect it with the original sources? And then there's an evidence here. And then soundness of reason. So when they create something new, for example, let's say, what is the story? Let's say Snow White. Snow White is happy ending. You may create different story. For example, Snow White become a soldier so that he becomes strong, for example. Okay, and the last one, this is the last one. So beside those activities, for example, the example is if you want to assess, what I gave you is, if you want to assess evaluation, you can use book review. But then actually there are several assessment instruments that you can use the whole scale, the whole HOTS. That is self-assessment. In self-assessment, you ask them to analyze their own work and then you ask them to decide whether they are already in line with the criteria. This is evaluating. And then after that, if you ask them to rewrite, for example, this is an essay, it means that is creating. Okay, so self-assessment can include all hot skill. And then next is, again, this is taken from the ministry decree in 2016 about assessment. If you can see here, this is the aim of Ujian Nasional. This is more or less similar to AKM. What I'm trying to say here is that actually there's no big difference between UN and AKM in terms of its purpose on paper. But then how it is implemented. If teachers know this, if teachers understand the decree, and then when it is not on the right track, you can actually comment or anything. So you know this. Okay. And this is the last one. So thinking is a skill. So drilling them with tasks will not improve their critical thinking. And my last slide is thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Semoga bermanfaat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Defianty, for excellent presentation with involving the participants, by involving all participants so we don't get sleepy. Okay, so before we go to Q&A session, I would like to remind you, Pak Dadan said that we will discuss about the writing project after this event, and you may stay for 5 to 10 minutes in Zoom. The discussion will be in Bahasa Indonesia and it will be recorded. If you can't join, you will get the recorded version. Okay. All right. Now we've come to Q&A session. Apparently there have been many questions in the chat column, and I'm going to read the question one after another. The first question is for Dr. Wilson. From Rina Husnaini Febrianti from Depok. Okay, Dr. Wilson, how do we assess the critical thinking descriptors such as remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating? Would you mind to share the scoring rubrics to assess it, for examples pertaining to writing skills? Thank you.
Well, that's a very big question. And I think that Ibu Maya has done a very good job of answering that. Remembering and understanding are not HOTS. They're LOTS, aren't they? They're the lower order aspects of thinking, lower order thinking skills. So what you have to analyze, what you have to assess in HOTS is analysis, evaluating and creating. And I think the rubrics that Ibu Maya shared are probably very, very, very helpful. And you can develop others using those as a model. Maybe Ibu Maya would like to say more.
Okay, what was the question again? Sorry, could you please repeat?
How do we assess the critical thinking descriptors, remembering, understanding, applying, and so forth? And she would like to know the example of scoring rubrics to assess.
Okay, so what we aim for is HOTS, higher order thinking skill here. So for remembering, I think as Kate has already mentioned and explained in her presentation, that for remembering, it's quite easy. If your students can answer the question correctly regarding the display question. For example, if we have a passage, Tony lives in Jakarta, and then the question is, who lives in Jakarta? Tono. That is remembering. So you do not need a criteria for that. But then if for higher order thinking skill, of course, it's related to the question, right, Kate? It's really related to the question. It's really related to the assessment instrument that you use, and then you can set up the assessment criteria. So you cannot, it is not fixed, as I mentioned in the presentation, that this criteria is customized to the task itself. I hope that answers your question. So a different assessment instrument will have different assessment criteria.
Okay, so teachers there has no fixed rubrics, yeah, Bu Maya? We can create our own rubrics, is that correct?
Yeah, it is customized to the assessment instrument.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next question from Ms. Nurhayati to Ibu Maya. Who will make the AKM questions, Ibu Maya?
Who will make the AKM question? It's the government.
Government, okay. All right, so that's answered, yeah?
So a few months ago, I was actually at we have a kind of like FGD something. The person who actually wrote the test, and then it's very complicated. So he explained the way how the test was created, and it's very complicated. Now, I mean, like I myself, for a teacher, for example, if I'm going to write a test with multiple choice, that's very difficult because you need to measure many things. You need to measure if it is a multiple choice, you need to be sure that your question or the answer is not leading, that the curves is a perfect curve bell, for example. So if your student answer the question all correctly, it means it's not a good test. So, and it's also, first it needs to be valid, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be practical. And AKM is way more complicated than that. So please, not this. We are not to write AKM-like tests, but we are to promote critical thinking in our class through assessment.
Okay. Prepare the AKM test through critical thinking, yeah? Okay, all right. Next question for Dr. Wilson from Ms. Hapsari. It seems that applying and creating are almost the same. Do you mind giving example of the difference? Applying and creating are similar. Would you like to explain the difference, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right there, because when you are applying what you know, you're creating. And every time we make new sentences in the language, we are both applying and creating. So I think probably what is meant in Bloom's taxonomy is that applying is at a simpler, lower level, whereas creating is doing something bigger. Do you remember I talked about big tasks and little tasks? I found when I was making this presentation that I kept on stumbling between one level of critical thinking and the next. I don't really think it matters. What I think the benefit of Bloom's taxonomy is that it makes you think about critical thinking. Remember that Bloom's taxonomy is not concrete. It's just a stimulus to help you think about thinking. But good question. Okay. There's one question that I would love to answer that's come up in the chat box.
Okay.
Which was from someone in Purwakarta, I think, about teaching in remote areas. And I think this is such an interesting question. I've just read an article, I think it was in Teflon, I can't remember. Anyway, I read an article recently written about teaching English on a little tiny island off Flores, a very remote island, where all the people are involved in growing vegetables and fishing. There was no tourism, no international contact. So very difficult when you're teaching in a remote area to make English important. And So what I would really like to say to you who are teaching in remote areas is try to make your classes relevant to your students' own needs, own lives. So get them talking and reading and thinking about their families, their island, the environment, even fishing and growing vegetables. There's so much critical thinking that you can do about growing vegetables. I do it all the time. And fishing. So make your classes relevant to your students' own lives. And I think that's the best starting point. Maybe Ibu Maya has something better to say.
Yes. So assessing critical thinking or inserting critical thinking to our teaching, I don't think that's confined to whether you are in a private school or in a public school or in a remote area or in a big city. So it does not it is not confined to that. You can always insert that to your teaching. For example, as Kate mentioned earlier, if you are in remote area, let's say you are at the villages where all students' parents are farmers, you can ask your students, for example, they ask just a simple question. Why do this farmer grow lettuce instead of carrot, for example? So those sort of question is actually initiate students' critical thinking. The why question. Or for example, from a passage, Tono lives in Jakarta. Instead of ask, where does Tono live? You can ask, do you think Tono like living in Jakarta? Perhaps your student will answer, no, it's too hot, for example, or something like that. Yeah. So it is not confined to that.
And there are so many resources on the internet. So if you've got the internet, you're made. So if you can ask your students, what problems do your parents face in growing rice or in catching fish? And when they start to talk about their problems, then you can go to the internet and start to find some of the answers. And then that gets the students starting to think. So, we're so lucky these days.
Okay. And that answer also answered Mr. Muntaza's question about other ways to trigger the students' critical thinking without using text. So you can actually use anything surrounding the children, yeah? Anything in the environment. Okay. All right. For next question, hang on. For both from Miss Dia. I know that my teaching style is old-fashioned. She said that her teaching style is old-fashioned, and she would like to try to make her students achieve something about. Hang on, they must make blog by themselves for learning procedure. Perhaps they can't get what I mean, so they just keep silent to do. And she must wait a week to make them ask that her task is asked for being hard or easy. So her question is how to make them respond fast after they thought they hadn't been able to do the task. How to encourage students to ask and to tell that the task is too hard for them. Go ahead, Dr. Wilson.
The answer is in one word, scaffolding.
Yes. Scaffolding. Yes. Okay.
So your students can do the most difficult task as long as you give them easy steps to build up to do the big task. And when they can then do the big task, wow, that's fantastic. So great idea to get them to do a blog, but do they know what a blog is? Can you show them how to actually create a blog? Can you give them some models of some other other students' blogs, not difficult models, but little models that they can imitate. What do you think, Ibu Maya?
Oh, I think many things, Kate. So the first one is that we need to tailor this to formative assessment somehow. So first, you need to set up a good example of successful learning. So you show them, so this is a good blog, for example. And then after that, so first you give them some materials, you expose them, and then you give them some criteria. So the more specific information that you give them, the better they understand. So that's the first, because they may not ask question because I don't know if you are Sundanese. Kate will not understand this. In Sundanese, we have this term, telir-lir acan. Do you know the term telir-lir acan? So when someone explains something, you don't even feel confused because you are too confused.
You don't even know what to ask because you don't know anything.
You don't know anything.
I thought that was called bingung.
You don't even feel bingung because you are too bingung. So that's why
Yes.
expose them to lots of successful or even not successful example. Both are okay. And then so that's the first. And then the second is relate to your questioning style. So instead of who wants to ask question, why not pick point one, pick a person, and say, please ask me. And then if, for example, so this is what I did with my class. You know the game Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? When you are, you can be a millionaire if you can answer the question. Now there are some helpful, then there are some help along the way that you can phone a friend, 50-50 or something. So this is what I did. So I asked the student and I said, if you don't know the answer, you may choose whether you select 50-50, it means I give them a hint to the answer, or phone a friend. So they need to pick one person to answer the question. So first you expose the students with successful learning, and then it's about the questioning style. So there are some tricks on how to ask questions. Okay. How to answer your question.
And I was also thinking, part of the problem with getting your students to write a blog is that then they go, but I don't know what to write. You know, it's like, oh, what am I going to write about? I don't know anything. I haven't got any ideas. And so you need to feed them ideas. If you want them to write a blog, what do you want them to write about? Tell them that you want to, very specifically, tell me about what you did on Saturday morning, what you did first, what you did next, what you did last, you know, something real, so that they've got an absolute scaffold. They know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But if you just say, go and write a blog,
then they will not know what to do. Okay. All right. Dr. Wilson and Dr. Defianty, I'm sorry, but we've run out of time. And today, right now, we're going to go to door prize session. Okay.
Ooh.
Yes. So Dr. Wilson will choose one best question, the best question in Dr. Wilson's opinion, to get the book Merdeka Belajar Itu Asyik. Okay, maybe you've got someone in mind, Dr. Wilson, because you already answered the question. And Dr. Defianty will also choose one best questions in your opinion. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Who will win the first book?
Can I just ask question? Because I
yes,
think
okay,
all
go
questions are good questions.
Okay,
I think
all of the
all
questions are
questions
good, yeah? Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm going to allow participants to unmute yourself. So the rules are, okay, Dr. Defianty, Bu Maya is going to ask question, and if you know the answer, type your name and institution without raising your hand. Type your name and institution, and I will choose you to answer, okay? You will unmute and answer the question, okay? type your name and institution now, so you can press enter after the question. Okay, go ahead.
Now,
Ibu Maya.
okay. So the first question is, what is the general principles of assessment? Mention 3 general principles of assessment.
Okay, General. Okay, all right. We've got Marfa Triani from Elvia Land School.
What are the general
Unmute
principles?
yourself. Unmute yourself, Marfa Triani, and answer the question.
Hello, can
Hello.
you hear me? Yeah. All right. The three main. Sorry, what is the question? Can you repeat?
The 3 general principles of assessment.
Oh yeah, the three general principles of assessment are: first, you need to know what to assess, and then what assessment instrument that you need to use to assess your, especially students' hearts. And the last is, what are the criteria in assessing your students' ability or the HOTS itself?
Okay, there are actually 4, but it's correct, right, Bu Maya?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
yes,
very
congratulations, Ibu Marfa Triani from Elvia Land School. You've got the book. This is your lucky day, and the admin will call you. Okay, we'll contact you.
Thank you.
Next, for Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson, would you like to choose the best question, or maybe would you like to ask questions similar to Dr. Defianty?
Oh, I don't think I can choose the best question because there were so many good questions.
Okay, it's so confusing. with
So
all the best questions.
I'll do the same thing as
Okay,
Ibu
with the
Maya.
same rules, yeah? So you're going to text your name and institution. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Wilson.
Okay. They might have to be the first person to answer.
Mhm.
Name a useful thinking routine.
Okay, name a useful thinking routine. Go ahead, name an institution in the chat column. Maybe they go back to, okay, Miss Mumtaza, yeah? Okay, go ahead, Miss Mumtaza. Unmute yourself.
Excuse me, is it
Yes,
taxonomy
miss.
bloom? Is it related to taxonomy bloom, miss?
Is it related to
No. This was one of the thinking routines that I suggested towards the end of my presentation.
Okay.
A
Okay, Miss
thinking
Astrid
routine.
from Leah, go ahead.
Think, puzzle, and explore. Think,
Yes.
share, and share.
Yay, okay. It's correct. Okay, congratulations. You've got the book.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson and Dr. Defianty, for giving us enlightenment with your presentation regarding English language teaching, critical thinking in ELT. Okay. I'm very sorry to tell you that we've come to the end of this international webinar by Kelas Kreatif Indonesia, and it is our greatest hope that you be enlightened by today's speaker and you be able to implement critical thinking in your classroom. And lastly, I'd like to thank Kelas Kreatif Indonesia for entrusting me as today's host. I would also like to express my gratitude to excellent participants for your enthusiasms. I'm Yuliani Kusuma Putri from STBA YAPARI-ABA Bandung would like to say goodbye. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you,
Maya, Bu
Kak
Maya, Bu
Dadan.
Yuli.
Thank you.
I think we
Pak.
will switch the language after this, yeah? We will discuss in
Okay.
Bahasa
Yeah.
Indonesia.
And I will leave the session.
Wait a second, Kate.
Hi.
There are so many, Kate, can you wait for 1 minute, Kate? Already.
Okay.
Okay. So, is
No, I'm
it,
still here.
yeah, is it possible to invite you again? Because so many participants said, oh, the session is too short. We haven't got like the whole comprehension about the topic. So maybe in the future, if Maya and you have time, vacant time available, and then we will invite you again. Is it okay?
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have a workshop so we can implement the presentation and create the
Yeah.
stage of creating.
Yeah, that will be great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you,
You.
Maya and
Bye
Kate.
now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
So,
for having us.
Bapak Ibu, saya ganti bahasanya ke bahasa Indonesia ya. Jadi terima kasih, baik Kate. Saya coba share screen, saya coba rekam dulu. Jadi bagi yang tidak bisa hadir nanti bisa lihat rekamannya. perkenalkan, nama saya Dadan. Bagi yang belum kenal, bagi yang sudah kenal, ya itulah gitu. Jadi hari ini kita akan berdiskusi satu proyek buku, yaitu buku Critical Thinking in ELT ya. Artinya kalau misalnya kita selesai webinar saja dan tidak ada follow up, biasanya sudah menguap gitu. Kadang nanti sore juga udah menguap, udah lupa lagi. Jadi kita harus kita harus memiliki sebuah produk dari apa yang kita pelajari. Kemudian kita biasanya sih gitu ya, kita biasanya berdiskusi 2 minggu ke depan di grup gitu kan, berhubungan dengan topik critical thinking.
Recording in progress.
Cuman karena ini konsepnya international webinar, jadi saya pikir ya udah kita buat buku saja. Kalau nanti bisanya Kate bisa menulis pengantar dan Bu Maya menulis pengantar, itu akan lebih bagus lagi. Pertanyaannya gimana sih Pak Dadan untuk menulisnya gitu. Nah, saya coba share screen ya. Bagi Bapak dan Ibu di kelas kreatif, tampaknya sih udah biasa gitu ya menulis. Karena ini itu buku yang ke-14 atau ke-15 gitu ya yang kita kita publish. Kemudian Bapak Ibu jangan khawatir gitu, kita tidak berbiaya. Jadi semua kegiatan kita itu free. Jadi Bapak dan Ibu juga tidak berkewajiban membeli buku. Cuman memang ada perjanjian harus boleh mengizinkan bukunya disebar gitu ke guru-guru lain. Jadi tidak eksklusif dicetak kemudian dijual, tidak. Jadi artinya kita mendorong orang lain juga untuk bisa belajar dari ide-ide yang kita tuliskan di sana. Saya coba share screen ya, Bu Yuli ya. Apakah sudah terlihat, Bu Yuli?
Sudah ada, Pak.
Sudah ada. Judulnya apa, Bu?
Daftar checklist.
Sekarang?
Masih, Pak. Masih daftar checklist.
Masih, berarti saya salah share kalau gitu. Maaf ya, saya stop dulu. Oke, sebentar ya. Mudah-mudahan bisa 10 menit ya kita diskusinya.
Iya.
Tapi kalau ada pertanyaan agak panjang boleh, yang mau stay boleh, yang mau leave juga boleh. Book writing project critical thinking in ELT.
Belum muncul Pak, sebentar.
Guru lain yang tidak mengikuti kegiatan kita hari ini itu bisa tidak.
Belum muncul Pak.
Belum muncul ya? Sebentar.
Ini Pak Dadannya juga nge-freeze ya, Pak Dadan? Are you there? Pak Dadan di situ kah? Ya, Pak Dadannya juga nge-freeze ya.
Betul, Pak Dadannya nge-freeze.
Wah, keluar ya Pak Dadan? Iya, keluar. Terpental. Ya Ibu Bapak, kita tunggu Pak Dadannya masuk lagi ya. Sepertinya semakin sore sinyal semakin susah. Ya. Kalau nggak sinyal FUP-nya udah kepake ya. Ah ini Pak Dadan udah masuk. Ya, Pak Dadan.
Ini langsung
ganti ke HP nih Pak.
Ya, maaf Bapak Ibu, tampaknya tidak bisa nih. Saya coba rekam diri sendiri saja dulu, kemudian nanti saya share. Jangan ghosting ya, maaf ya. Kalau udah teknologi itu kayak gini nih.
Iya.
Jadi saya coba nanti rekam dulu, karena kan kalau converting dan Zoom bersamaan tuh nggak terlalu kuat ya. Jadi nanti saya rekam, kemudian filenya saya share, boleh stay di grup dulu. Kalau misalnya nanti ada yang, Pak, boleh nggak kita diskusi jam berapa, kita janjian, boleh juga ya.
Siap, oke.
Maaf sekali Bapak Ibu, Bu Yuli, maaf sekali ini ada kendala teknologi nih.
Ya, nggak apa-apa Pak, sangat dimaklumi Pak. Ya, baik Pak, terima kasih. Berarti nanti komunikasinya di grup aja ya Pak ya. Dan
Ya,
kalau
betul.
butuh pertemuan Zoom lagi akan diselenggarakan oleh Bapak, itu ya akan dijadwalkan ya. Oke, Ibu dan Bapak terima kasih telah stay di sini. Oke, kita ketemu lagi di pertemuan-pertemuan berikutnya. Pak Dadan, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Recording stopped.